The restaurant was full, loud with laughter and clinking glasses, the kind of place where nothing ever seems wrong. People came here to celebrate deals, birthdays, victories. No one expected danger at a table near the window that night. And yet, sometimes, the most powerful acts of kindness happen in silence, folded into a small piece of paper, passed hand to hand, changing everything in a single moment. Before we begin, if stories about kindness, courage, and ordinary people making extraordinary choices touch your heart, please subscribe to Story of Pure Kindness, like this video, and leave a comment below. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need them. Now, let me tell you what happened that night. Richard Hale was used to attention. At 46, he was a self-made billionaire, the founder of a fast-growing tech company that everyone in Silicon Valley seemed to be talking about. His life was filled with meetings, flights, and carefully guarded conversations. But tonight, he wanted something simple. Dinner. Alone. He had chosen a small upscale restaurant in downtown Seattle, away from the cameras and private rooms. He wore a plain gray jacket, no tie, no visible signs of wealth. Just a tired man who wanted a quiet meal and a moment to think. What Richard didn't know was that quiet places sometimes hide the loudest dangers. His waitress approached the table with a warm smile. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her name tag read Emily. She wore a simple black uniform, her brown hair tied back in a low ponytail. Her eyes were alert, kind, and unusually focused. "Good evening," she said gently. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Just water," Richard replied. Emily nodded and turned away, but as she did, something caught her attention. Two men sat at the bar across the room. They weren't eating. They weren't talking much either. One of them kept glancing toward Richard's table. The other subtly checked his phone, then looked up again. Emily had seen enough late shifts to recognize when something felt wrong. She returned with the water and placed it on the table. As she did, she leaned in slightly and slid a folded napkin next to the glass. Her voice stayed calm. Her smile never changed. "Sir," she said softly, "please read this and do exactly what it says." Then she walked away. Richard frowned slightly. Curious, but not alarmed, he unfolded the napkin. 3 short lines were written in neat handwriting. "You're in a trap. Don't move. I've called for help." His heart skipped. Richard looked up instinctively, but forced himself to stay calm. He remembered the note. "Don't move." He slowly placed the napkin back on the table, his hand steady despite the sudden rush of fear. His mind raced. Was this a prank? A mistake? Then he noticed the man at the bar watching him closely. Emily moved through the restaurant as if nothing had changed. She refilled drinks, laughed politely with customers, and casually stopped near the hostess stand, whispering something quickly. Inside, her heart was pounding. Emily had overheard the two men earlier. They hadn't known she was nearby when one of them muttered, "That's him. Billionaire. Alone. Easy." She didn't know Richard's name at the time. She didn't need to. She just knew someone was in danger. And she refused to ignore it. Emily slipped into the back hallway and quietly dialed 911. She explained everything in a calm, steady voice, giving descriptions, locations, and timing. Then she returned to the floor, carrying plates like nothing was wrong. Back at the table, Richard forced himself to take a sip of water. He focused on breathing normally. He thought about how many times he'd walked past people like Emily without really seeing them. Servers, staff, invisible to powerful men like him. Now, she might be the only reason he was still sitting there. Minutes passed like hours. One of the men at the bar stood up and slowly walked toward Richard's table. His posture was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Emily saw it happen. She stepped directly into his path, holding a tray of drinks. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, deliberately stumbling. The tray tipped. Ice and water spilled across the man's jacket. "Hey," he snapped. "I'm so clumsy," Emily said quickly, grabbing napkins. "Let me help you. The restroom's right this way." She guided him away before he could argue, apologizing the entire time. The second man stood up abruptly, scanning the room. That's when the front doors opened. 2 police officers walked in, calm but alert. Everything happened fast after that. The men were questioned, separated, and quietly escorted out. Other diners barely noticed. A few thought it was just a routine check. Richard sat frozen until one of the officers approached him. "Sir, are you okay?" Richard nodded slowly. I think I am." Emily stood a few feet away, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. Richard stood up and walked over to her. "Did you write that note?" he asked softly. Emily nodded. "I'm sorry if I scared you. I had a bad feeling." "You didn't scare me," Richard said. "You saved me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I almost didn't do anything," she admitted. "I thought maybe I was wrong. But I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet." Richard looked at her, really looked at her. "How much do you make working here?" he asked gently. Emily blinked. Not much. Enough to get by." She was a nursing student, working double shifts to pay tuition. Her mom was sick. Her car barely ran. She lived with constant worry. And yet, she had risked everything for a stranger. Richard finished his meal in silence, but his mind was loud. The next day, the story didn't hit the news. There were no headlines, no viral videos. But Richard didn't forget. A week later, Emily received a call asking her to come in on her day off. She worried she was in trouble. Instead, she found Richard sitting at a corner table. "I owe you more than a thank you," he said. He paid off her student loans. He arranged a scholarship to finish nursing school. He helped cover her mother's medical care. But more than that, he offered her something she hadn't expected. "I want you to work with my foundation," Richard said. "People who notice danger. People who act with kindness. The world needs more of them." Emily cried, not because of the money, but because someone had finally seen her. Years later, Emily would tell this story to new nurses during training. Not to talk about fear or danger, but to talk about courage. Richard would tell it at board meetings when discussing ethics and leadership. Not to talk about wealth, but to talk about listening to quiet voices. Because kindness doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looks like a waitress doing her job, and choosing to care when it would have been easier not to. So if you ever feel small, invisible, or unimportant, remember this story. Your kindness might be written on a napkin. Your courage might be silent. But your impact could save a life. And maybe, one day, someone will be telling your story.